So, as we've gone on all these other sessions, and at least that one was introducing, we don't start with the tepid morning clap. We start with the riotous thunderous applause. Ladies and gentlemen,
I want that to happen every time I walk into a room.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Well, we're good with electronics. We could probably make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you for the introduction. So, my name is Adam Hiley, and I have a background in software engineering.
My name is Dan Turnus. I have a background in electrical engineering. And together we run Maniacal Labs, which is our name for all the crazy stuff that we build and occasionally try to sell. And so this all got started when Adam and I discovered a mutual interest in electronics when we realized that we had built the same project independently of one another. It was a small clock that told time using 3 multicolored lights. And after much shop talking and bouncing ideas around, building some of them, we started thinking about designing electronic kits.
So, over the last few years, we've designed 4 different hardware products, which we've tried to sell, and their related software, which we've, of course, all released as open source.
So the AllPixel was our first successful product, and also our first go at a Kickstarter, which was definitely a learning experience. We had been playing around with digital LEDs like a NeoPixel and Non-Star, and we wanted an easier way to hook up and control these lights. So the AllPixel is a USB interface board that provides data and power connections to these lights and works on Linux, Mac, Windows, and platforms like Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone. And all you need to do to use it is to specify the particular type of LED, the chipset that you're using, and the common animation and control library takes care of the rest.
Which is called BiblioPixel, which is our most prominent software offering, and is a Python framework for working with light animations in an easy and output-agnostic way. So it was designed to be as comprehensive as possible while allowing you to focus on the animations and the art, and not having to really be concerned with how the data might actually be output in the future.
So in keeping with the making lights easier to use theme, the long pixel turns a strand of analog LEDs, the kind where the whole strip is just one color, and turns that into a single giant addressable pixel. And the WS2801 driver chip on the board allows multiple of those modules to be chained together and independently controlled. The long pixel can be used on the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi, pretty much anything with an SPI communication interface. And there's no firmware. It was just a hardware project. And it was a fun exercise in PCB design and, of course, PCB design debugging. And speaking of doing things that are fun, for various definitions of fun, in our opinion, fun is a great place to get started.
So we started this as a little more than a hobby. Basically, Dan and I had a common interest in the types of things that we wanted to build, but ultimately we were doing it because we wanted to, because we were enjoying it. We suggest that you focus on what you find the most interesting. In our case, that was weird, quirky timepieces and all things colorful and blinky. You should make something that when it's done, you're excited about it, you've learned something, and you want to share it and that process with the rest of the world. All this may sound somewhat obvious, but as with all things, if you're passionate about it, you're excited about it, you'll find much better results, and you'll work much harder for those results.
So we found that there were a few basic things that we needed to consider before making the jump from hobby projects to potentially commercial products. For one, has it been done before? Is there already an established market? If so, how would you break into that market? Related to that, if there's something already out there, what might you be able to improve on? Chances are that other people than just yourself might want such improvements. You need a good understanding of what you have and why others might be interested. Know your killer feature. And all of this knowledge will help to put together that 15-second elevator pitch that's so important when people ask about your product. We found that being able to speak with authority and conviction on what you're working on helps a lot. It shows a lot of confidence in what you're doing.
So the move to trying to make money on all of this from it just being a hobby came really more out of the both of us wanting sort of a more professional-looking product for ourselves. We take great pride in our work and don't like to just have breadboards full of wires. And then we figured that other people might actually want the same thing. So, as with making any physical thing, making more is cheaper per unit. So trying to sell that to the community just sort of seemed to make sense with that goal. But we certainly recommend first focusing on trying to sell your product to support itself and your hobby, as having your hobby just pay for itself gives you one less thing to worry about. You can focus more time on improving your skills and your designs. But this is open. If you want to make money on your hardware, why are we just giving the design files away for free?
So for us, prior experience with and learning from open source projects has been vital to improving our skills, both in terms of hardware and software design. Even when we were developing an interest in these fields many years ago, having the open source community as a resource to draw on was very helpful and made getting into this stuff a lot more approachable. And certainly having that resource available to those new to these fields is a great thing. And frankly, we wouldn't have been able to make what we have without open source. And we want to do what we can to contribute back to the community that has helped us out so much. So also, we don't have to bother with expensive and proprietary tool chains. You don't need to be a huge corporation with a huge budget to start playing around with an Arduino. And the cheap and well-supported development platforms like the Arduino make it easy to get your hands on some hardware, and they have a great existing knowledge base to get started with. Support can come from the originating group, like the Arduino Corporation or the Raspberry Pi Foundation. But in most hobbyist cases, that initial support comes from the community itself. One other thing to consider with these is that once you know the basics, these platforms don't require any additional investment, financial investment, to unlock very advanced usage. We're lucky that the cheap hardware nowadays is so powerful compared to a couple of years ago even. And of particular interest to myself, being the hardware guy, for PCB design, open source electronic design automation, or EDA packages like KiCad, offer incredible feature sets without any limitations. And of particular note on KiCad, one of the major contributors for that project is CERN. And we figure that if it's good enough for atom-smashing nerds, it'll probably work well for what we're doing.
So, first of all, a bit of a disclaimer. We're not lawyers. We're just, tech nerds. This is just our experience of a relatively complicated subject. Now, obviously, the real major difference between open software and open hardware is the resulting output of that work. With software, as I'm sure you all know, it's just binary or the code files. But with hardware, it's not just the designs, but the end resulting physical product. Either way, though, open source still means that all design materials, code, schematics, CAD, whatever, are available for the users to see. Now, the end user may not care that their particular electronic device is open or closed, but there are certainly some advantages that we've found to designing all of our electronics in the open. For one, because the users can see the inner workings of what we've worked on, we're encouraged to make everything as clean and clear as possible. It's kind of like knowing that someone's going to be coming over to your house later, you clean up your dirty laundry so they don't see it. Your circuit schematics will be easier to understand, board layouts are simpler to follow, and as an added benefit, we try to apply the same ideas to our documentation, so like our wikis and quick start guides, and etc., which makes using the products that much easier for everyone once they get it. We hope. Yeah. Now, also, since the community is able to sort of see what you're thinking with your designs, they can provide much more targeted and constructive feedback. They can provide ways to improve on the designs because they know how it was designed, unlike most things. Also, the identification and resolution of quality issues can happen much, much quicker since the users actually know what's going on. It's not a black box.
So, also, we're able to draw from existing open work by operating in the open, and with proper attribution and observation of licenses, of course. But it is nice to not have to reinvent the wheel every time we want to start a new project or try something new and different. And as Adam was saying, it's also easier for the end user to modify and tinker with our designs or code if those are based on familiar platforms and designs. And as an example, in our case, the AllPixel started as a modification of the Arduino Pro Micro schematic and evolved quite a bit from there. Now, while the open mindset is great, it does present its own unique set of concerns and challenges.
So one of the ones we get asked a lot is that many people think that because the designs are open, people are going to just take the designs and go and make their own and completely leave you out of the loop. This is technically a valid concern, but in our experience, we found that it's usually far too expensive and time-consuming for the individual user to tackle. The economies of scale allow offering a much finished and tested product at a far cheaper price than just making a few of them. And also, designs that can be accomplished at scale with modern manufacturing technologies would be difficult, if not more likely impossible, to handle by the home hobbyist.
Very small components, very difficult to solder by hand.
Coming from the guy that's had to assemble all of our prototypes.
Yes. We'll let the machines do it next time.
Yeah.
So, on that line, is someone really going to steal your design and make your fortune? Probably not. The Arduino is actually a good example of this. So there are many clones, of course, and while they all work in the same ecosystem, people still see the official boards as the best supported and of the highest quality. That brand is very strong, and by all accounts, they appear to be doing pretty well because they have a quality product. And success is a double-edged sword, though. Most people won't just clone your design verbatim unless it's really popular. There has to be a big enough market to warrant that effort. And for smaller, more niche items like some of the stuff that we've done, it's probably not worth it to anyone. But if you are trolling eBay one day and you find, hey, someone has made a knockoff of my widget, congratulations, you've made it. You're popular enough for someone to want to put forth the effort to copy your work. And so it's good to keep all this in mind. It could potentially be a reality, but it really shouldn't keep you from moving forward with an open idea.
So, did I mention we're not lawyers? This is still complicated. So kind of going back to the beginning of open hardware, we didn't have a lot of options, and what most people used were software licenses. So things like MIT, BSD, GPL, and LGPL were popular choices. They can work, but they were really not designed with hardware in mind. Then the sort of next thing that people went to was things like Creative Commons, which is a copyright license. It applies a little bit more, but it's really meant more for printed works or recorded works. Not it's a little too general for hardware and physical objects. Now, I mentioned those purely for the completeness. They were used in the past because we didn't really have any better options. Actually, the AllPixel was, I believe, licensed under MIT. But now we do have options, so please don't use any of those that I just mentioned. The ones you should use are the actual hardware licenses that do exist now. Now, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these were designed based on copyright law, but specifically with open hardware in mind, and to comply with the open source definition. So your three major options there are Taper, which is spelled TAPR, the CERN open hardware license, so kind of like we mentioned, CERN with KiCad before, and SolderPad. Now, obviously, you're doing all of this because you want to let others use it, but how much? I mean, we're kind of talking the copyright versus copyleft argument here. With the open source hardware licenses that I mentioned previously, you basically have two options. The first, which is on the copyleft side, is CERN and Taper, which are near equivalent licenses. I generally prefer CERN over Taper. And they're basically the GPL for hardware. So they're very much non-permissive. Attribution is required and all that, but derived works have to be under the same license. On the flip side of that is SolderPad, which is effectively the Apache license, but for hardware. And actually, it's based on the Apache license, and therefore is on the copyright side and very permissive. Attribution is still required. You do have some patent protections, but aside from that, derived works can be under different licenses and all the things that normally go along with permissive licenses.
So, one big question, of course, what about allowing commercial use? Well, if you don't allow it, it's technically not open. Section 6 of the open source definition explicitly prohibits excluding any fields of endeavor, and commercial use would be one of those fields of endeavor. So on this, as we've said a couple times, on this and other matters of licensing, we definitely encourage you to go out and do your own research, find out what might work best for you in your situation, for your product. But one thing that helped us out a lot, was a talk by Ari Douglas at the 2014 Open Hardware Summit, who specifically talked on licensing, and that has been helpful for us navigating through this changing field.
And he's actually is an IP lawyer that used to work for MakerBot, so he knows his stuff. It's on YouTube if you look him up, but I can give you the details on that later.
Yeah. So after you've had a chance to do some research, you've done some homework, and you're ready to bring your product into the world, where do you go next?
Well, for licensing reasons, I can't say that. Just go for it. So, this is what we did with our binary epoch clock, which was the first product that we ever did way back when. We just made 50 kits, packaged them up, and released them to the world, sold them on our website. Unfortunately, as you look at this, you notice this is a clock that tells time as the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970, as a 32-bit binary representation. Some nerds love it, but as you can imagine, it's a bit of a niche product.
You should have marketed it as a novelty timepiece. It might have helped.
I think it was.
Yeah.
We're gone to more DevOps groups.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this took over a year to sell. That doesn't mean that you can't succeed with this, though. Though one thing I would highly recommend is going the user assembled route, which is what we did. It does make it probably a little bit more niche, a little bit more nerdy, but when you just package it as a board and a bag of parts and some hopefully detailed instructions, you don't incur the overhead that's involved with either you assembling them, God forbid, or commercial assembly for your product. So you can usually do a lot better, make a lot more profit off of it that way. Now, the second option would be platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, which allow you to gauge interest and raise funds with far less upfront cost. So with the All-Pixel, despite being pretty unknown in the community at the time, we had a massive response. It was great for focusing, right towards the community that we wanted. People loved the idea, and we actually were funded in less than 48 hours. We hit 400% by the end of the campaign. With the long pixel, which Dan mentioned previously, not so much. Back into the niche territory. We still use it, but it failed to achieve funding by the end. But that's okay, because using a platform like this, we didn't end up wasting a bunch of time and money on production of a low-volume product that didn't have that much interest.
And in doing some of the research for the Kickstarters, we have found that it's not a good idea to ask for funding to finish developing your idea. It can instill much more confidence in the potential backers if you approach them with a well-built, functional prototype and are approaching them in such a way that you're asking for money to go into just higher volume production. For one, Kickstarter requires this in terms of the functional prototype, although some have tiptoed around this with various claims and graphical trickery. We don't encourage that, not at all. But ultimately, the more finished your product, the better position you'll be in to start asking people for their money. So in our case, just as an example, the All-Pixel went through several prototyping revisions before we got to the finished, or the final prototype. So really, though, the only major difference between the final prototype version shown on the top and the production version shown on the bottom is the board color, which on this projector is difficult to tell. The top one is kind of a purple color, the bottom one is...
That's the OSH purple, but if you get into open hardware, you will know and love.
Mm-hmm. We have and we do.
Yeah.
And the one on the bottom is just the black finish. But aside from that, the professional pick-and-place assembly is the only other difference.
So now we get to the point where releasing hardware and releasing software become much, much different. These days, releasing software is relatively easy. I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into it, but pretty much, compile or whatever, put the binaries, put the code files out there, and people can download them and run your hardware, or run your software, sorry. Hardware, on the other hand, you're going to need a lot of math, and you need to start to love spreadsheets. Fortunately, I'm a math nerd. So you want to have a full bill of materials, PCB assembly costs for multiple quantities. So you see we've got 100 to 2,000. This was for quoting how much they're going to cost for us. You'll want to factor in the crowdfunding and payment processing fees if you're using that sort of thing. The shipping costs to multiple geographic regions for multiple quantities of your product. Packaging and kitting costs. And last but not least, we certainly recommend adding a 10 to 15% just fudge factor onto the base unit cost of your item, just to cover any unknowns that might come up in the future. So all of these will help you determine your unit cost and your desired margin, and then therefore the final pricing. But then you have to actually get them to people. Sadly, people can't just download the AllPixel. Well, I mean, they can download the designs, but until we have better 3D printers, they can't just download the thing. So there's a couple of main questions you have to ask yourself here is who's going to be shipping? Your options are generally yourself, your contract manufacturer, or maybe a third party if you're at the, hopefully, large volume levels that you would need to go that route. Second would be who's going to be actually kitting and packaging the product for shipment. Again, either yourself or probably your contract manufacturer, which is the route that we went, and then basically factor these into your time and the cost calculations I showed previously. This is actually where that fudge factor I mentioned came in on the AllPixel. Like I said, it was very successful, and we had a lot of backers in the States, but more of them actually just all over the world, which meant we would have had to have filled out, I think it was 162 customs forms, which I didn't want to do. So we took a little bit of that fudge factor money and paid Seed, our contract manufacturer, to just package, kit, and drop ship everything for us, since they're much more equipped to do that in large volumes.
And so, speaking of getting things out there to people, a wise man once said, "The secret to the universe is marketing."
Very much.
Some Mel Brooks fans, I see. And certainly getting your name out there and raising interest in your idea and your product is important, but it is definitely a challenge. And it is certainly something that we struggle with, given a limited marketing experience and an even smaller, as in non-existent, marketing budget. Fortunately, social media can be helpful in this regard, but as I'm sure you'll all agree, the level of noise that people deal with nowadays on those platforms is significant, and it can often be hard to be heard above that noise. Fortunately, though, as we mentioned, crowdfunding sites can be helpful in this regard. They can actually help focus both your presentation and the audience's attention. So people go to these sites with an idea of what they might see and what interests them. And having this advanced knowledge can make it easier to both get and hold their attention. You approach them in a certain way.
So you're really nothing without your users when it comes to open anything, but especially open hardware. Being part of a community is important whether or not you build it from the ground up yourself or you join an existing one. This can help in obviously many ways. For one, we found that with support, it's far easier, takes a lot off of our plates because we have an enthusiastic community that supports each other as opposed to us having to answer every single question that comes through. Also, either having your own forums or being part of some good pre-existing forums can certainly help provide a place for all of your users to share the work that they've done with your product, as well as a great place to get your word out when you're actually launching. So we posted all over the place every time we've launched our Kickstarter. And last is outside contributions. It's kind of a little bit more rare these days, but just like with open software, we found that with an enthusiastic community, people will actually submit improvements to our circuit design, or to the board layout, or whatever, that you can then incorporate into future releases. It takes a little bit longer because it's a physical item, but it's still possible and it benefits everyone. Now also, especially when making tools like we do, we don't really make, we're not producing a finished, production-ready, packaged consumer product. It is a tool to do other projects with. It's certainly been helpful for us to collaborate with other people and companies that make complementary things. When we did the AllPixel Kickstarter, there's a great example of this. we were contacted by these guys from a company up in Virginia called Alow. They called us because they made LED panels, and we were trying to sell an LED controller. So obviously this was a great match. They sent us some panels, we sent them some controllers, and all of us put together some really cool demos that we got to show off during the Kickstarter so that people could really see this is what you can do with it, as opposed to just the few things that we had come up with prior to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff that came out of that.
Yeah, just a few.
Lots of blinky lights. It's awesome. But so on the topic of collaboration and sharing, we do this stuff because we enjoy it, and we want to share not just the results, our successes, but the process that we've gone through as well, which does include some of our failures. Doing things like this talk, speaking to you today, allows us to go beyond just posting code and posting notes to the internet, and allows us to actually share our experiences face to face. And in talking about some of the key ideas and considerations that we've run into up to this point, we hope that you might find it beneficial, especially if you're considering making the jump from fun to profit yourself. And so we'd be happy to answer some questions, and if you have any in the future, please feel free to reach out. And last but certainly not least, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions, anyone?
Any questions?
Thoughts? Yeah. So you put your hand up first.
So after the initial push on the Kickstarter, how's it been like having inventory and being like successful?
Good question. So we've done one or two production runs.
Two additional production runs aside from the Kickstarter.
So which are like 500 each. I mean, we're still in a relatively low volume realm. We used Seed, which is spelled with 3 E's. If you're trying to look for it, as a contract manufacturer. They're based out of China, and they actually sell the All Pixel on their website. So we kind of do that as like a consignment deal. They take a little bit of a cut. I think it's 18 or 20%, and then eventually they send us money. Long story.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit to get out of them because you got to do things from China. We also though sell on Tindie. So if any of you are not familiar with that, it's Tindie. It's Etsy for electronics. It's just sort of that, small, custom build electronics and whatnot. A lot of kits and things like that. So now, I mean, it is a little bit of a kit, but we have them on there, and then we also keep stock of all pixels at my house. So, once or twice a week, we get another order in, and I ship it out. So it's not too bad, but yeah, we've had to do a couple of runs, but pretty much it's just go back to Seed and say, hey, can you make another 500? And they run them all.
Yeah, it helps going with that run. I mean, there have been some difficulties, but we've overall been very happy with them because we can do things like, hey, we need more. We have some money in our account. Go make more.
Yeah, and a good point on that. Don't just take all your profits and spend them, because it's really expensive to make more. Yeah. So figure out whatever that costs, like the unit cost of the All Pixel is within like a third of what the sale price of it is, which is pretty standard margins. So make sure you keep that around so that you could then make again what you just sold. So yeah, there's the question you have.
So as far as Kickstarter goes, in some areas of Kickstarter, 4 days goes by, entire companies are split up whose job is to help people like
Yes.
you fulfill it. Is that happening in hardware world yet, or are you guys still kind of...
Not that I've seen. I mean, when we did the Long Pixel, we signed up with BackerKit, which was more from the data collection side. Because the Kickstarter data collection for fulfillment is horrible. Yeah. But I haven't seen any for actual, production. Actually, Seed does have a thing that I can't remember what the name of it is now, and it's specifically for crowdfunding, where they'll handle all of that. I haven't used it yet.
But it's starting to show up.
It is.
The CMs are starting to figure out that, hey, if we can make this process easier for the people that would want to send us money to do things, we'll make more money. So, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's all about money.
So it's not familiar with software.
So, the Adafruit community is a huge one. I think SparkFun has their form set of.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of forms.
It's the merchants they usually have a community set up, and it's especially in Adafruit's case, they have a lot of for the products that they sell, they have a lot of learning and educational tools in order to use them. They have examples of both staff projects, and they have a active community that submits designs and projects to them, and then they will promote those on their website and their blog.
We get stuff posted on there relatively frequently, actually, on Adafruits. Not as frequently as Hackaday, which is another good one.
Yes.
Hackaday.com. Theirs is not. I mean, there is somewhat of a focus on open source, but it's not like only open source. You know, they do talk about other things. Another one, which is maybe sort of a tangential one, is OSH Park. So we mentioned the purple board before from our prototypes. If you follow their blog, follow them on Facebook or on Google Plus and all of those, they post a lot of, like, every time they see a cool board come through or a cool design, they'll post about it, or people will send those to them. So you can kind of find a lot of really interesting, neat open source designs. I mean, there are certainly, like, I've known commercial companies that do a non-open source design that they have manufactured through OSH Park, but given the nature of their service, which is, cheap PCB manufacturing, there's a lot of open source designs that are on there. People really love them. It's like $5 per square inch for 3 copies of the board. So, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, you mentioned the video online for the copyright.
Yes. Ari Douglas, A-R-I is his first name, and then Douglas, like it sounds. It's from the 2014 Open Hardware Summit. Honestly, if you Google Ari Douglas, it's like the 3rd result, because it was pretty popular talk.
And I think the open source hardware licensing is changing very rapidly.
Yeah.
So,
Still working on it. Michael?
What are you guys going to build next?
Can we tell them?
This is an open.
Yeah. Okay. It's open. Oddly enough, we have the Git repo for this currently on GitLab, because we can have a private repo. More not because we're trying to keep it closed, but because, like I was saying before, there's still some dirty laundry on the floor. So I don't really want everyone to see that. So we have the All Pixel, which still is successful. We still sell it. And that's a USB interface. We are now working on a wireless interface version of it. So plug in power, connect over UDP, and off you go. There might be a Bluetooth version of it eventually,
Right.
or from the get-go. It probably all will be based on the ESP8266 chipset, or the 32 if the SDK settles down.
It depends on how long it takes us to put it
Yeah,
together.
yeah. So we want to be able to just, stick LED strips all over the place and not, because right now the biggest problem, like, I like the L Pixel, it's great, but you have to have it like within wire range of a computer. So now this just needs to be within Wi-Fi range. That's kind of where we're going. Hopefully it'll work out.
What's your experience in using Git for KiCad projects?
For what?
Using Git to manage your KiCad projects.
That's fine.
Yeah, there have not been very many instances where I've had to pull down our designs off of it and get the project up and running again.
So you're not taking pull requests.
No, yeah, see, okay. Now, KiCad is a great example of something that was designed to work in that environment, because the files are text. Yeah. Now, I've never tried to merge one.
That would be
So I admit, we're not the greatest experts on what would happen if you're trying to pull and pull requests. It probably would work, but I can definitely see a path that you would quickly get to a totally borked file that's just, it doesn't know what to do with. Because, most of those merge tools are really designed for source code and kind of some understanding of structure, and I don't know how they would go
So
for that.
one of the main reasons we use something like that is for version control. So if for some reason I make a change that would require an hour to fix, I can just pull that one file down and replace it. But that is an excellent point, especially what we were talking about with making it easier for other people to use, especially if we're doing version control and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would be something we would want to consider in the future.
I hand-edited in order to submit pull requests to the KiCad library.
Oh, yeah. The stuff that we've had in the past has more been stuff where we go, oh, that's a cool idea, and then just manually do it. Partly because doing layout of a board is not like just rearranging your code, because it is there's some dark black magic in there. And so another note, as if you get into any of the open hardware stuff, and I know there's also Eagle, which is very popular. We just like KiCad because it's open source. Also, Eagle, the free or student version, has some really small limitations on the physical size of the board. But these things have auto routers. We use them in the beginning. Do yourself a favor. Don't ever look at it. Just learn to route the board manually. It does take longer, but you're going to end up with cleaner designs, cleaner boards, because you're putting a lot more thought into it. Like I did one recently where I just wanted to see, the auto router put in like 47 vias, which is like punches between sides of the boards, and I did it with 3. So,
and especially if you are early prototype stage, you have an idea of how something might change, you can lay it out manually with those anticipated changes in mind, should you need to make them. So,
yep.
I mean, that's something you do it a bunch of times, you get better at it.
Any other questions? Yes.
So you talked about you're doing this for the profit, having the money to do your next one. So what would happen to you guys if, let's say, all pixels basically the front page of it and get 150,000 orders? How would you respond?
We'd dance a little jig.
That would be one of those problems that we refer to as nice to have.
Yeah.
Sure.
But they are...
Some companies at this stage have absolutely just self-destructed because they couldn't scale.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would take some thought. I mean, because we definitely aren't anywhere near that. I mean, we'd call up seed, and be like, hey, we got to run a bunch. I mean, because right now, because we're running at, for them, relatively low volumes, usually our order, I think our first order was like 800 because of the Kickstarter, and then all the the next ones were like 500. That's relatively low for them, and the turnaround time is about 8 weeks. Now, we could either say, okay, cool, everyone, you want your 100,000 all pixels, great. It's going to take 2 months to get them to you, or probably more like 3 or 4. But also, if you're doing that volume, they probably would dedicate a line to you. They'd get it back to you quick. But yeah, it would take a lot of logistics, and we probably would hire people and hopefully get some of that money up front.
So one.
Actually, we'd have to.
Well, yeah. One thing to note on that, though, is the importance of the data. Like, how are we able to say, okay, we have exactly 98,432 people that will pay money for this once it is available? How do we know that? So being able to work with those metrics, a little bit of a creative manipulation of data to predict the future. There would be some of that, like what we're talking about with spreadsheets. We would try to figure out exactly what that demand would be and how best to meet it, and definitely working with the CM. Again, nice to have, but it is a problem.
No, we get happy when we get an order of like 10.
Yeah.
I don't have a box that big.
Yeah.
I got to figure that one out. I mean, we keep boxes, but they're relatively small. So
So do you get feedback from seeing as far as they get ordered as large or small? Do they come back to you and say,
yes, yeah, they've done it once.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a time where, and this is where, like, we like seed because they're cheap, but
They're cheap and good quality in comparison to other.
yeah, because there's a lot of other Chinese contract manufacturers that, yeah, they're cheap, but the quality definitely suffers. So seed's kind of somewhere in the middle. The thing we found is, as with working with any company that's in another country on the other side of the world that speaks a different language, there's a bit of a barrier there, and I think that they've got a lot going on. So we did have a time where all of a sudden we got someone basically emailing us saying, "Hey, we were going to order like 60 from Seed, and they don't have the stock." And we went, "Wait, what?" We had no idea that we were that low. We still thought we had hundreds, and I mean, which is great because like the sales have been doing really well. We just didn't know it because we had to fight with them because they wanted to switch to, it was either quarterly or every 6-month reporting of our sales and our numbers. And we're like, no, monthly. Now, mind you, I still usually have to send them an email once a month and say, "Hey, what's the numbers?" But yeah, they generally just have to. We may have to either increase production to meet that demand, or ship some from them and ship some from us. Because we do keep, like, I've got 100 on stock at home right now. It just depends upon where it is.
So that's another thing that we run into doing this, and I run into during my day job. Well, you too. communicating with, I mean, we're a global economy now.
Yeah.
So you're going to be talking and working with people all across the globe. Keeping that in mind, keeping in this potential, like, well, they're asleep now, so it's going to be 4 hours till they get back to me. Keeping that in mind when you're communicating is helpful.
It's a good thing I'm a night owl. If I get an email from Seed, I will be awake until they stop responding. 2 in the morning, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because otherwise, like, I can get 6 emails back and forth. Otherwise, that's 6 days. 1 email per day and waiting for the round trip. So, yeah. Sorry, what? Oh, SEEED.
Seed with 3 E's.
Or when we email each other about it, it's like seed. It's just as a running joke. So, yes.
Mention something about just for after your Kickstarter, there's something fulfillment or like getting information from you.
Oh yeah, Kickstarter does have a thing where basically they'll send out like a survey that everyone has to fill out and they have to put in their address and phone number. Well, hopefully, actually, you can specify what they send back. Basically, just all the shipping information, and then you get a CSV file that includes all of that details. The problem we found when we did the first Kickstarter was that the information they gave you ended up not being enough for what Seed wanted because they were shipping internationally. So we actually had to go back and get more information from people. But there's other companies like BackerKit, which actually they've partnered with Kickstarter. I think Kickstarter said, we don't want to deal with this anymore. We'll let someone else do it. And you still have to pay them. It's like $300 to start, and it goes up from there. But you basically shuffle everyone off to their website for fulfillment. And one of the other things you can do is, because on Kickstarter, people often add extras that you can just like add. Like, say the base reward is $20 for a single wall pixel. And you're like, well, I want 3. It's kind of hard with the Kickstarter interface to do that. So what they do is, it used to be, like if you're just using Kickstarter, they would have to say, okay, well, I'm pledging $20 for the all pixel, but I'm going to add an extra 40 on, and then they have to tell you what that extra 40 is for. With BackerKit, they go on there and they actually select, whatever they want, it deducts it, and all the math stays correct. There's other options than that too. That's just the one that I'm familiar with because I researched it when we did the long pixel. So there's options. Just don't stick with the Kickstarter one.
Anything else? All right. I think we're good.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.